increase.
Always
Very
always
excited.
a name.
I got to dished out some money.
Bernadette likes to do that.
Yes, so
go ahead.
very impressed.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're just going to go ahead and get started. It is, for the record, it is Thursday, February 13th at 5:02 p.m. We're going to go ahead and start this on the Meridian side with roll call attendance. Ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borton?
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh?
Here.
Councilwoman Perot? Councilwoman Strader?
Here.
Councilman Hoagland?
Here.
Councilman Byrne?
Here.
Mayor Simison?
Here.
Absent is Councilwoman Perot.
And with that, we also have a roll call attendance for the West Ada School District Board of Trustees.
Trustee Kloffenstein?
Here.
Trustee Ozuna?
Here.
Trustee Johnson?
Here.
Trustee Smiley?
Here.
Trustee Newhoff?
Here.
Dr. Marianne Reynolds, Superintendent?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 3 is adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion and a second from the Meridian City Council to adopt the agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Byrne.
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion second to adopt the agenda as presented. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is adopted. Does the West Ada Board need to adopt the agenda as well, or you guys?
We're good.
You're good? Okay. All right, item 3, Meridian City Council discussion. So, Meridian City Council discussion items 4A, growth and comprehensive plan discussions. So, we had a request for, to not have presentations so we could allow for more dialogue. So unlike normal, where we have a nice little precursor to really kick this off, I kick this off very gingerly, and then we'll go in from there for what we really hope is I think a frank conversation about the growth that we're all facing here and its impact on you, as well as what is occurring from the city side as well. So I think the important part from this is we have adopted a new comprehensive plan, that occurred in December, and the city still has many action items that we are focusing on from the adoption of that new comprehensive plan. Among them are, where do we want to grow? Our priority growth areas. I think that is one of the key components to that. The new comprehensive plan has kind of defined how we want to grow, to a large extent, what we want the community to look like, but the where is as big of a question as anything else in that context. We are actively working. In fact, I just left a meeting to come down here as we are, at least at the staff and mayor level, identifying those areas. And we hope to be bringing that to council in as early as March for their review and feedback. But it will involve conversations with our partners for you all to see if this is where we plan on growing, how does that impact you? Do you also have services in those areas? So with that basic understanding about where we are and what we're experiencing, I'm going to be quiet. We do have Caleb Hood in the room. If you have any specific conversations or questions about the comprehensive plan and what it means moving forward, but just know that we have a new comprehensive plan. We did have involvement in the school district in that process. Hopefully people are familiar with it, but how we grow and where we grow from here is really the key question. So with that, do I have anybody that'd like to
Mr. Mayor,
take a, yes, Mr. Byrne.
I'll pass the baton over to my dear friend, Councilman Cavanagh, to talk about, before we start getting into the conversation about growth, but talk about some recent discussion about the busing at Hillsdale, if you don't mind.
Sure. So,
Absolutely. Councilman Cavanagh.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Byrne. I think this part is somewhat timely, and I think it deals with growth and leads to, and I'm part of the reason why we don't have presentations. I value the collaborative discussion and think that there's a benefit in engaging one-on-one or as a group to talk about some of these things. But there was a topic at our city council meeting on Tuesday regarding busing, safety busing to Hillsdale Elementary. And it's coming as a recommendation from our Transportation Commission, and it ties, I think, directly to growth. And so, at least for some context to start the conversation going, was about the school district's plans to, it sounds like maybe to abandon safety busing from an adjacent neighborhood as soon as next month, and helping the city council to understand the why behind that. From a council level, you look, say, Eagle Road, elementary kids, doesn't always compute. And so to have an understanding as to maybe some of the thought process that the district goes through when they make a decision to cease with a program like that.
I could jump in if you'd like. I believe the safety program in that area was because of a change in Eagle Road. There was they're expanding Eagle Road, so there's construction. I believe that's what the issue was. And I believe, my understanding is that they're currently looking into that situation and trying to come up with a reasonable plan for everybody, especially a long-term plan. It might be that we have to lean on safety busing long-term for that area. We just don't know, but it's definitely under consideration right now. We have a number of areas within the district, these little hot spots that just kind of come up. We have a very good partner in Cascade Busing. They support us 100%. And so sometimes things, though, because they're a third party, aren't communicated quite as quickly, but they are on it, absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Yep.
I'm trying to figure this pattern out. The council has been asked by our Transportation Commission to either endorse or draft a letter of support around continuing that safety busing program for Hillsdale. Is that something this board is open to? And should these questions come in the future? This is the first time I feel like that we've had this type of request come from our Transportation Commission, and we want to help support that, but we also want to make sure that we're communicating in the appropriate manner with the appropriate mechanism to you all so that there's some consistency in it.
Well, I'm quite excited, actually, with the, potentially we might have a liaison. And that might be a nice conduit to be able to communicate issues like this, these little hotspot issues. Instead of making it formal, we have a nice informal system. And I believe right now, actually, with there is an informal system currently, but that might be a nice change too. So, yeah. I think, frankly, our partners with the city are doing a very good job. What you're trying to do is communicate issues as quickly and as reasonably as possible. I think we're quite happy, actually, in the school district about what we see with Meridian. Obviously, there's going to be small issues like this, but we will carry on. We will do it.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cameron.
And if at the end of the day, if these are the big issues that we're wrestling with, is how to make sure we get kids to and from their home to school in a safe manner, those are great challenges that we have to face.
Yeah.
Keeping along lines with what the conversation topic is, would one or all of you maybe help us understand what your engagement has been with the other jurisdictions that you support? While I still sometimes refer to West 8 as the Meridian School District, there's a host of communities that you serve and ever growing. And while we're focused on our comprehensive plan, it would be beneficial, we're all growing, to have some understanding about what conversations, engagement you're having with the other jurisdictions so that we get a good sense of kind of how you're communicating and what those challenges that you're hearing from some of our neighboring municipalities.
I bet you, Trustee Newhoff, because you're an Eagle, so.
Yeah, so I represent the north end of the district, so kind of stuff north of Chinden and the basically the entirety of Eagle and all of Star that's in our district and part of Garden City. And we've never quite done something like this with Eagle and Star, but Dr. Randalls and I and Eric was involved in one, and Joe and a couple other just this week went and visited with the new mayors in Eagle and Star to have kind of a similar discussion. It was fairly informal, but kind of where they see where we're going, kind of here's what we've got coming down the pike, and how can we continue working on this. It gets complex because then we've got Garden City and Boise and Cuna too.
Right.
And perhaps some others. Steve, I think, represents part of Boise, and perhaps can speak to that. But at the same time, I know that we have employees that are actively engaged in discussions with the planning authorities in all these places, get actively involved in long-range planning in the community I live in Eagle, and so forth, with the others to do it. It's just, sometimes the nature of the interaction kind of depends on the nature of the way the municipalities run too. They've all got their own character, so.
Did you see there were characters?
In some cases, there may be some characters in Meridian too, I understand.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Strayer.
I just wanted to say, thanks everyone for being here, and I really value you guys as important partners for us, and just to convey that I read your opinion on development applications. Every development application, I read your opinion, and I really value that input. And I think what I'm hoping to get out of this meeting is to get a true understanding of where we're at. What's kind of the baseline with the, amount of growth that we have already approved and what we're expecting? How does that look realistically? And then, give us a sense of the path forward from your perspective and how we can support you. Because I think it's a shared, you're the subject matter experts, but it is a shared challenge, making sure that our children have a quality education. And so I just really want to understand how we can be great partners, how we can help and really do this together and support your important work. How often, if you've given some thought to how often we should be meeting like this and what kind of input would be helpful to get from us, and just really kind of have that real discussion, just so we make sure that we're really coordinated and we're supporting each other.
Trustee Smiley?
I guess I'm kind of the politician in the group, because I think there's a 12-step, I'm warning my fellow council members, I think there's a 12-step process you have to go through, to get out of this. But, I had the privilege of working in the educational field for many years and serving in the Idaho legislature, and now I'm at this seat. And I will say one thing, I think that we face so many of the same problems. And, because the growth in Meridian has been explosive, but yet most of my district is within the city limits of Boise. And so Mr. Mayor and I were both at the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce meeting today, and I think that all of us are involved in a lot of it. I've been, I think I've been in the legislature testifying or there 3 or 4 times already this session. It's a challenge, and I think a good part of it is, especially when we handle those issues of growth, that we speak the same language. And our obligation as a school district, if a child comes to the doors of public school, we have to figure out a place for that child to be. We can't say, no, we're past our enrollment cap, we're full. We have to figure out something, because that's what public schools do. And that sometimes means some of the issues you talked about where we have to do safety busing, or we have to say that enrollment is closed to this school. And that is a hard decision, especially for that family that shows up and realizes they have to go to the next school over. And that's a hard thing to say, and as you know, those issues, they just have to be done. We have some areas around Hunter Elementary. We have really almost a crisis situation out at Hillsdale, because that school opened and is already bursting at the seams, and we've had to make a lot of adjustments in that case. So it's a matter of working together, and I appreciate this meeting.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Trustee Smiley, to that point, and maybe this is a question for all the trustees and maybe administration. Take Hillsdale for an example. I talked to a couple of you about this. So that's a school where some folks who live in the neighborhood go to that school, and other folks who live in Century Farms go to other schools. I live 1.5 miles, 2 miles away, and that's our home elementary school, Hillsdale is. So my 3-year-old was milling around here earlier. That would be, today, if he was in kindergarten, that would be the school that he goes to. And so I think that creates some challenges, because a citizen buys a home, and in the case of Hillsdale, they may be able to see that school from their backyard, but that is not the school that they're going to go to. How can we as a city work in conjunction with the district to educate home buyers about the potential schools that that residential unit will serve. Because I think when it comes to high schools, larger schools, big magnets, strategically placed throughout the valley, we have a good sense for the most part about where people go. It becomes a little more challenging with middle school schools, much more challenging with elementary schools. But we all serve the same constituency, and I think that's a piece that if we could find a way, either with staff or as electeds, to come up with a mechanism so that when the public buys a home, they have a better education, at least for the next year or 3 years or 5 years, that this might be, just because you see a school from your backyard, that might not be the school that your children are going to attend. So that we're not creating false expectations.
I don't know if that was
Whomever.
Councilman Kavner. I do know this because, you know, our first home, we were with easy walking distance of one school, and my children went to 3 different schools, you know, and it was something, and I totally understood why. And as a matter of fact, later on, my daughter came back to me and she said, that made me so much better a person. And, you know, we didn't think that at the time, but it's tough. And this is what happens when you are in a district that is growing this rapidly, because we have to get to build a new school, a 66 2/3% majority to build the school, and a lot of us wouldn't be sitting here if we had to be elected by that margin. You know, and we have to plan ahead. For example, the proposed Blue Valley Elementary, we use the standard plan, so we can get, you know, if we can get the support of the patrons, we will get moving as quick as we can, because Hillsdale is kind of the epicenter of a lot of that. And the problem is, you know, you can't tell people where they can and cannot move. We live in an area that, you know, this is the land of opportunity, and people seek that opportunity, and they look for that. Anyway, so those are challenges. I think if we work better together, we'll never solve the problem. We'll never, you know, I used to say in the legislature, if I can leave and everybody's a little upset with me, I've done my job.
So if I, just to put it out there, because I know this has been a conversation that the council has had, and if I wanted to have you speak to the school district, what information would you like to see from the school district in the letters that they transmit that would be helpful to you to make a decision on growth?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Byrne.
I think it's a great question. In fact, I think there's been some discussion about this recently with, you know, coffee meetings in the morning. But I would like to see, I really appreciate Joe's letters that give us, you know, data and numbers and capacity information, and it would help me and maybe others as well if we had information of other schools or elementary schools or junior highs in that geographic area that may be planned in the future to help us know that, hey, Hillsdale is the only school we have here, but we have X elementary school coming on board in 2 years, or we have a plot of property right here that we have ready. We're looking for funds in order to build it. That type of information, I think, would be, just thinking out loud real quick, that might be something that would help us out quite a bit. I'm sure there's other ideas as well.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Just to pile on just a little bit, like, I think a timeline for absorption of the capacity is kind of what I'm trying to get to. So what would help me from a data perspective is like a baseline across the district view of, for the amount of developments that we have planned, what does that look like with the schools that are planned now, right? Without an additional bond being issued. What is our base case scenario that we have to work with? Hopefully we can improve on that, right? But what are we really looking at? And then as each development kind of comes before us, here's a timeline of the schools that are in the planning phase, when they'll come online and when they'll be able to absorb that capacity, so we can like manage it as we're, you know, we do have the lever to pull in city council of approving or not approving applications. And education is not the only reason we're going to approve or not approve an application, but it is a very important consideration. So I think if we kind of had a little more granularity on that, that would be very helpful.
And to
Councilman Hope.
up on that, because I agree with what Councilwoman Strader is saying, is there's two components to that I see. One is for the very short term. Is that development going to put that school over capacity? There will be busing and those things occur. But then the longer term impact of growth overall is if we keep approving certain things, no matter where, our ability, speaking on behalf of the school district, our ability to build more schools is going to be outstripped. You're approving it so fast, we are going to be so far behind that as a district, as a patron of the district, I don't want to see that happen. So that long-term vision, how can we make sure we aren't going so fast? We could build them in areas that you've got capacity and we could fill them up like that. But where does that put you? That might not be a good thing as well. So it's that short term plus the long term that we would like to know, have more information on.
Councilwoman Pearl.
To that note, those are the kind of questions that we are getting from the public. So this isn't just us making that decision, but when the public comes in, so as you all probably know, I've been on planning and zoning for 3 years prior to being elected to the council. And when we would receive a letter from the district that said, here are the schools in that area, this is how much our current enrollment is, this is how much our capacity is, oftentimes the enrollment's over the capacity, and there's no more information about what happens next year or the year after, or are these students being put in, in portables? Are they going, wasn't any information about what was happening. And then we would get questions from the public, just like what Councilmember Hogan was saying. So the square mile from Linder to Meridian Road and McMillan to Ustick is very, very full. And those are the locations where we frequently get the members of the public that would come in and ask us, what's going to happen to my student if this application goes in? And a student that's already enrolled, not even the new developments, but the students that are currently enrolled and that are currently living in those locations. And we didn't have a way to answer those questions because all we have is numbers that say that you're over capacity in those schools, and that was the extent of the information we were receiving. So we are getting those long-term questions from existing owners that come and publicly testify on new applications that are coming. So just to share that feedback it's not always just questions that we're being asked about what's going to happen with this new development, but it's also the existing owners that live there that are curious about what's going to happen. Are their children going to be displaced because of the new development that comes in? So.
Any other members of council first that want to weigh in on this topic?
Mr. Mayor, one question for the district. Is there a metric that tracks anticipated future capacity needs from I assume so. I mean, is it reflected in a number that is adjusted on a regular basis?
Yeah, I mean, Eric could talk to this a lot more, but I mean, he's constantly looking at the plats that are approved here in Meridian and all over the district.
Right.
And we have some ways of sort of predicting how many students that, you put in 1,000 homes here, how many students is that likely to generate in that geographic area? And I mean, it's sort of, the process is driven by plat approvals, basically. So, but Eric can probably.
It's retrospective though, I think right now, right? So we're looking at it after the plats are approved, not prospective. So I don't, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't actually look at if you added this, except for in the letter process, if you added this in this area or you expanded in this area first, until the proposal. So it's a retrospective look.
Okay.
Well,
Eric's shaking his head now.
What I mean by retrospective is the plat's already approved. Like are you looking at prospective plats before they're approved?
Sorry.
Eric, if you would skip on just closer to a mic so you get picked up.
I didn't want to be at the table, though. We look at preliminary plats that have been approved, but we also collect all the applications that come in. And so then I look at those numbers as well. Now, we haven't been doing that as long. Jill and I have only been working on that for, well, I don't know, let's say during this school year, as opposed to more historically. Just to give you a broad preliminary plat number, though, out of the ones that are out there, and I've been tracking these for 15 years, we have 14,400 kids in the pipeline across the West Ada School District, because there's 18,000 approved home sites for construction. So then when you look at what are your facility needs for that over time, we do that in our long-range facility plan. So 4 elementaries, 2 middle schools, and a high school in a window of time now that's actually 7 years, in a variety of locations. Those elementaries are pretty much north, central, and south. The middle school is north and central. The high school is most likely south. But then we have to update that facility plan on a regular basis. I'm working on it now because those preliminary plats are, as you guys know, kind of a rolling number, right? Once that development is done, it gets dropped, and in the meantime, more have been added. Those are the largest numbers. I saw it as high as 24,000 last school year. Prior to the recession, the most I'd ever seen was 12 or 13,000 on that kind of rolling basis. So just as a kind of an indicator of the rate of growth, and I'm not just speaking of Meridian, obviously, the most plats in our district right now as a geographic region is actually Star and Eagle.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Eric, do you have the ability to break that down to a municipal level? I recognize you've got this number district-wide, but do you guys have a good sense as to what that rolling number looks like in Star versus Meridian versus Eagle?
Yeah, Councilman Cavanagh, I can break it down by a quarter mile. I can break it down by any geographic amount that you want using a mapping program. I'm sure your planning people use ArcGIS. I get the data off of Compass. I update it probably every other month, and then go look and see what the numbers have done and in different parts of the region. I do it in the most granular way when we are redrawing school attendance areas, because we don't just factor in current kids, we also factor in future kids.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Bashir.
I'm gonna get away from the table.
Maybe you'll be back. Was curious if you guys could comment on how you set the boundaries for schools, and if you have given any thought to that, right? Just because my kids go to a different school. My kids go to Hillsdale, so I don't have a dog in that fight, but I care about it because it affects a lot of residents in the city. And so if I'm looking at it, feels like we're not getting the right synergy there if we're busing a lot of folks next to a school out of that area to go to a different school. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on how do we set boundaries today? Have we given some thought to how you guys want to set your boundaries, if that might change, or if you have a methodology that you're planning to stick to?
Sorry, I'm a bad penny. So the basic process is, I'll describe Owyhee High School. So that's going to open next fall. So I will put out a bunch of information to all affected, even potentially affected parents. So in this case, that's everybody in the district, because it's a high school and it will have a large attendance area. I hold informational meetings in which parents come, and essentially the meeting consists of me presenting methodology on calculating growth, what numbers you use in redrawing attendance areas, where the kids are, where the over enrollment is happening, and the punchline of the meeting is you can sign up to be on the attendance area committee. I now limit the size of that committee to 14, because once I had a bigger one, Robert could tell you his stories about that. It wasn't very good to have a big committee. I tried to get more representation. It just made the process worse. So, but that committee is also made up of 4 people who are on a permanent attendance area committee and 2 staffers, myself and our transportation person. That group meets periodically throughout the year in which we look at growth issues. We look at where the kids starting to show up, what are the growth trends, so that we have a richer source of data once this somewhat bigger committee meets. That committee meets and comes up with a proposal for the attendance areas. I would go through the list of criteria. There's about 8 main things that we look at in terms of distance, safety busing, safety, neighborhood continuity, etc. Although the overriding criteria of any of them is balancing enrollment, because that's why the voters passed a bond in the first place. They then we take that proposal out to public hearings. We listen to what people say. We respond to the extent that we can. Sometimes we can't, because if everybody got their way, we wouldn't be changing the attendance area at all. And why did we pass the bond in the first place? So then once we have gone through that process, we come up with our final proposal, which we take to the Board of Trustees for approval.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Just a follow-up, thank you, that was very helpful. Is that consistent for other, and I am new, obviously, so I'm still learning how certain things work and how other school districts may do this, but could you give me a flavor for, you know, is that a consistent way of doing that with this type of a committee? Have you all considered alternative methods that maybe don't have, you know, all that I'm getting at is it feels a little messy. You know, you have a lot of people on a committee. I'm just concerned a little bit about the outcome. If the outcome kind of gives us, you know, these situations where we have a lot of folks next to a school that are getting bust out of it. If that's something you're considering actively, or something you may consider in the future, how you're making those decisions on boundaries.
So if I could, the process that I used, I developed by speaking to a lot of school districts about how they do it. A lot of them do it in a manner similar to mine. They don't always necessarily have as rich a data as I do, but to give you a spectrum, some just have a group of staff members who just draw up a plan and take it to the board. Clark County has a standing committee, I'm not sure if they're still doing it this way, that just changes attendance areas. They open schools at any time in the school year. When they open, you move. So it could be October, January, doesn't matter. Didn't like that idea, so didn't adopt that plan. They had a $3.4 billion bond to build 88 schools over 10 years. So they were really dealing with growth in a way that they would laugh at us when they think that we're dealing with growth, but that's how they did it. So anyways, and I still will talk to colleagues of mine around the country because it often emanates out of the communication department that does this. They may have some districts that are more richly funded than us have more planning people than we do in West Ada. But in the end, the presentation piece of it almost always comes from the communication people.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pearl.
Another follow-up question to that. So can you give us an idea, also, I'm still learning about this process, of how many times the committees meet and what the process is when the committee members maybe don't agree or they can't come to a consensus? What is that?
Oh, so the length when the committee meets to formulate a plan, it usually takes 10 or 12 meetings. It kind of depends on what's the complexity of their assignment. So are they doing just a high school or just an elementary? Like I had one committee that just did a single elementary, right? To deal with the issue of disagreement, the way I run the committee is I initially split it into two pieces, two equal halves, so 7 in one room and 7 in another. Each one comes up with their own proposal based on the information they have. This is why it's better to have some of these members of the permanent committee, because they understand the methodology better. There's a lot to learn, for sure, when you're doing this. After they've each come up with a plan, then they meet, and each subgroup presents their plan, and then the entire committee's job is to reconcile the differences in their proposals to come up with the one that we're then going to take out in the public. Now, when I only have a 14-member committee, we truly operate this way, by consensus, which means essentially anybody on the committee has something of a veto. That if everybody in the committee can't say, yes, I agree with this plan, then we have to work on it some more until we're all in agreement. As I said, that didn't work the one time I had this really big committee, which is why I'll never do it that way again.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
excuse me. I just want to let the record reflect that Councilwoman Perot entered the meeting at 5:21 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, I think, The other thing I think is really important to understand around, because the Hillsdale thing has come up a number of times, is that the committee recommendation wasn't to cap the enrollment. The committee recommendation was, I think, to leave it, was it to leave it open? When they made the recommendation and the board adopted, what was the actual final recommendation for Hillsdale?
So, to give you a little history of the Hillsdale Challenge, so we opened Hillsdale a year ahead of the YMCA because we were having an overcrowding problem at Sienna that it was actually more severe than it is at Hillsdale now. That facility is just slightly bigger. They had 830-ish kids, 4 portable buildings, right? And then Mary Mac was about 150 kids over. That's a pretty small facility, so as a percentage, that's actually worse too. So we put that project on the bond and opened it a year ahead of kind of the whole Hill partnership plan had been, because the crisis was getting bad enough at those 2 other schools. When that school opened, it opened with 450 students, 150 of them live within the current walk zone, and the remainder, the other 300, lived in what was the Sienna and Mary Mac attendance zones. Then the subdivision got going in earnest, and it outperformed expectations in terms of home construction and sales, because another piece of data I get in these projects is I talk to the big developers and say, so give me your number, how many homes per month? 8 to 10 is the answer you usually get. What's the high end, 15 or 16, right? And they say, we almost never hit 15 or 16. Well, I'm gonna tell you Hillsdale did. And so that school grew by 100 kids per year. So the committee worked on that project, trying to figure out a way to solve Hillsdale's overcrowding. But the only answer we could come up with was essentially to just transfer the overcrowding back to the schools that Hillsdale relieved in the first place. And doing so would have caused some sets of kids in those schools to have been moved to elementary school 3 times in their elementary school career. So to Trustee Johnson's lead into this, what we recommended at the time was to leave the attendance area as was, but to cap enrollment when grade standards in multiple grades exceeded our district policy. So we have class sizes 32 at 5th grade, for example. We got to August, and as the kids came in over the summer, that happened in multiple grades. I'm not going to remember for sure. 1st grade was the worst, but there were several grades. And so at that point, myself and Dr. White and the principal got together and said, well, this is the recommendation. We don't have anywhere else to put kids. Hillsdale also is unique because the property is just under 5 acres. There's nowhere to even put a portable. So our backup plan does not exist, and we can't let the class sizes get any bigger, right? And so our recommendation then was, we're going to cap enrollment. We're going to send the kids to the space that we had near us by, and one is not near but south of the freeway, which some of the kids go to Sienna and some go to Silver Sage. The only space available south of the freeway to an elementary is Pepper Ridge, but the challenge with sending any kids to that school is that school in its entirety goes to Lewis and Clark. So for example, you might have sent a 5th grader from the Hillsdale attendance area to Pepper Ridge, but then they would have gone to Victory Middle School or Lake Hazel with none of their peers. And one of the criteria that you look at is trying to create something of a feeder system where you keep kids together from level to level. It's one of the more complicated pieces of that process, because we do not have a pure feeder system that goes elementary to middle to high. In our current configured schools, it goes 3 elementaries feed 1 middle school, 1.5 middle schools fits into a high school. So you inevitably split zones, but you're trying to get to 50-50, so you can try and keep them with their, a large percentage of their peers. And most committees, when you get down to about a 30% split, they start to really get uncomfortable that you are splitting one group off in too small of a number. But that's the bit of the history of how Hillsdale became Hillsdale. If we had 10 acres there, we would have just started moving in portables.
Sure.
But we can't in that case. There's nowhere to put them.
So let me bring this back into the growth conversation just a little bit. You've heard a lot about Hillsdale and South Meridian, and we're going to move into item 5A here in shortly, which is going to be about bond and levies. understanding we are minimum 2 years away from any new school being built in the district, what message would West-Ada like to deliver to the Meridian City Council outside of an application about growth in South Meridian and your viewpoint on your ability to serve effectively, or what that looks like?
You know, actually, if I may, sorry if I'm kind of overstepping, but that actually was one of the questions I had when it comes to your growth, and I'd love to figure this out. We had talked earlier this evening about hotspots the district looks at. You know, we have a map which, through our analysis, we'll see hotspots, and we then have a growth plan that tries to address them. One of the things that we have also is, we have an estimate of schools we're trying to build, and we have an estimate of land we're trying to buy and land we've already purchased correctly. But there's a lot of, it's guesswork in our little bubble, and it would be so ideal to be able to match and overlap your bubble with ours. And that's one thing I think that would be so valuable for this, especially when it comes to understanding what your high priority areas are for growth. I mean, when you're planning out your growth, where do you put your community services? Where do you put your parks? I mean, what are you looking at doing? And then as you're changing those priorities, because buildings, maybe a development failed, and so you have to, so your plan is going to softly shift. I mean, how can we communicate your plan shifting and our plan shifting to this crazy growth environment? I mean, is that even possible?
Yeah, and I think that that's where we're going to be here in 3 weeks, to be able to say, here's where we think, and how does that overlap with what you guys think?
Okay.
From that standpoint.
That's a great comment.
But from where I know you're planning for your next school, while it's in the growth area, it's not in the high growth areas.
Yeah.
Both in South Meridian itself as well as in North Meridian. So that's, those are two components that will, the one school you have planned, is it just going to solve the current issues you have versus an absorption rate and a plat rate that could likely outstrip. And so that was kind of where I was headed towards on the conversation about South Meridian is, I understand a year of construction, you got to pass the bond, you got to go through the process, a year of construction. It's 2 school years from now before it starts. Homes are still going to be come through, homes are going to be approved. Is that a problem for the district?
Well, but if the homes suddenly don't get, I mean, if they're approved, but they don't get built, which is what happened during the recession, then we suddenly have a school out there in the middle of nowhere, and there's no kids going to it, or we have to do this crazy busing situation. I mean, that's a risk. So, kind of like going back to what Trustee Johnson was saying, we have to kind of look in the rear view a little bit. In other words, we have to see what's already out there, has been built, actually they committed to. It's a challenge, without doubt. And there's also an issue of building velocity. I mean, if you've got, I think the Century Farms, they were at one point, tell me if I'm wrong, but they were at one point 20 homes per month, maybe 20, 25 even, which is pretty high. That's a very rapid rate. A lot of other developments, they tend to go a lot lower, maybe like 10 or even less per month. And so it's like, we understood actually the velocity of that development to be a lot lower. Anyway, it's just some ideas, but I think going back to this more strategic look, if it's possible to have that overlap and understand kind of where your data and our data are looking at, that would help a lot, especially as we're looking to buy land.
Mr. Mayor.
That's what pro.
To that end, the City of Meridian has developed a program, a software program that is allowing them to look at those layers within our city in terms of what services will be becoming available, and look at, there actually is a mapping program that's pretty much close to completion, is my understanding. So I don't know if we could ask our planning department if they're able to take some of the school district's data and implement that into what they've already done, or maybe they're already past that point, but do you know, Mr. Mayor?
I don't know. I don't think their data is different than our data. I think pretty much the data always comes from the same place. It's shareable data, so outside of, the only data that we don't probably have that would be helpful is what the current attendance areas are for the schools and the number of kids in those attendance areas that attend those schools. That's probably what is missing from the data that we have that they don't have.
That's not in the
Well, it changes
Oh.
daily from that standpoint.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Board.
to that point, I don't think we have to hope that they overlap. I think we wouldn't create a priority growth area without the direct active input from police and fire, for example, are key service providers, and the school district is one of them. And for us to decide what a priority growth area is, it has to have the district at the table and help drive that. So when we say we're going to promote growth in area A and not in B, the school district is one of the partners that drives that decision. And we're all around this table, and all of our staff speaking the same message. So it's the same map. And if we have a growth area that we'd like to grow in and it doesn't fit the district's priorities for real reasons of funding and property acquisition, then we need to know that early, because that'll help drive what our priority growth areas are. So I think you're in early, hopefully at the table, helping create this map.
Mr. Mayor.
Trustee Smiley.
One of the real challenges that we have as a board is we deal with 6 municipalities, county, and 3 sections of Canyon County. And something as simple, for example, I was out at Centennial High today. The Centennial High School resource officer is a Boise City policeman, but yet dealing with incidents that happen within the city of Meridian. And that's a real challenge. We have to sign 3 completely different agreements with Ada County, City of Meridian, and City of Boise when it comes to our SRO program. And I'm here to tell you, the SRO program is absolutely a crucial program. It is not an option. As you're saying, how do you quantify something that they prevented from ever happening? And that is, but that's an example of the 3 contracts we have with the 3 law enforcement agencies are dramatically different as far as who pays for what and so forth. And that is a very difficult situation to handle. Another one is precisely the topics we're discussing now. The City of Meridian has one policy, the City of Star has yet completely a different policy, the City of Eagle yet again another, and the City of Boise yet again another. And then we have little pieces of CUNA, and we, you know, it is a real challenge to fit all those pieces together. And anything that we can do to get on the same team is good for the kids and good for our communities. And that's one of the challenges that, you know, that's one of the reasons I'm so happy we're all here. Because it's a, you know, so we solved the problem with Meridian. It's kind of like squeezing the balloon that bulges out somewhere else.
That is, Mr. Mayor, I think that is a great example. And that was one of the earlier question about what the collaborations with these other cities, because, for instance, we could build a plan to slow growth or maybe not approve as much growth in North Meridian, but that doesn't stop the growth from spilling into Star and Eagle, and do we really solve the problem?
So I have a question, because you mentioned these priority planning, and I guess it would be helpful, and maybe every other trustee already knows, but to kind of understand that process, because we do have that kind of flat, I'm calling it retrospective, it's the pre-plan and but we don't have that prospective look. And so that process, it sounds like that's kind of how you set your prospective growth area, priority growth areas. So how does that look, and how have we typically engaged in that?
I think we're setting our priority growth areas for the first time.
Okay, this is the first time process. So how are you envisioning that process would work?
Well, so far, we've been looking at what's entitled already to grow, what has a 5-minute response time from our fire department, which Owyhee High School does not have, for example, in the area around that high school. Our sewer sheds, because that sewer dictates where people can grow easily from that standpoint. Police is a little different because they're out and about, but they will have a cost in terms of, you know, how many officers do they need to grow into those priority areas to provide that service, even though in one area we are planning a substation or precinct station for them. But those are really the three key components. You notice I left off parks. You know, parks are generally come in through development. So we have areas where we've identified the parks, but they're more through the process without setting the future from that standpoint. So that's what we've been working on. We've identified three priority growth areas so far, and then other areas along the edge where we think growth will occur, but it's within those other components. But they're going to work on, the map wasn't clean, so they're working on some stuff. And like I said, we hope to get to council by the first Tuesday in March for review.
Just a couple, can I ask a couple questions on that? One is, will there be public input into the decision, or will that be just council and mayor? Like, we have a public input process on the priority growth, and I'm asking, kind of trying to understand where the public will be in that, if they will be in that process at all.
You know, I have not had a conversation with council in terms of what they would like to see. I mean, it's primarily where our services exist. So it's almost self-defined. I mean, that's reality. I mean, you can look at it right now and say, South Meridian, there's already land annexed. It's within the 5-minute response time. It's have sewer that's being pulled. Guess what? There's going to be homes there. So if we are not prioritizing that as a growth area, then we buried our head in the sand. But it's a conversation the council needs to have if they think that there's that input from the community that will be needed.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burke.
I think that's a great question, Mr. Johnson. I think that we have a decent idea from a community citizen-based group of people that helped us with our comprehensive plan. And so and I believe that there's been talk about reaching out to a segment of those folks to help give feedback going forward, along with staff and other stakeholder groups as well. So I think that we all pretty much know. It's just a matter of organizing, making it look pretty, so we can offer it to the people.
My reason for asking is, was trying to figure out a mechanism, because so that priority growth, so I'm walking this through, the priority growth area happens. Part of that process is that it will cause more schools, right? It's just going to cause more need for more schools in wherever the priority growth area is. And so I was looking for a leverage point to say, as there's public input or public push in those areas for priority growth, we also have that public support for the building of those schools. So kind of having that, if there was an opportunity to have that conversation if there was.
Mr. Mayor?
That's what Kevin.
No decisions have been made by the council, but one of the things that I really applaud about our city council over the last few years is we have been really proactive in seeking public feedback. Even things we're not required to. We value hearing from our stakeholders and from our citizens on lots of things. So while there's no conclusion, obviously, right now, we haven't had that decision before us. I, for one, will always be one that advocates for giving our citizens the opportunity to chime in more, not less. I think that the rest of the body, I don't like to speak for the council, I get in trouble when I do that, but we've proven time and time again that we really value that in public feedback.
With the challenge of passing the bond, the opportunity to inform the impacts of that priority growth area become so much more valuable, I think, for us, because now we've got a prospective look in that area to say, here's a priority growth area, and now we know this is going to impact the schools, and there's going to be bonds for this. And then that changes a conversation for us, I think, because right now it feels very retrospective from a public perspective. I mean, I think we have good information amongst us, and so I was looking for an opportunity to make that more of a public perspective conversation.
And maybe for the reality perspective, this is really an area where we're not going to grow. To put it quite bluntly, because if you look at the growth area, it goes all the way from South Eagle to Chinden and Black Cat. That is the growth area of Meridian, pretty bluntly. So it's really saying, where do we not want to grow within that band? That's the the basics of it.
Or where do we slow? Is that a better?
Yeah, where do we not do any additional input in infrastructure so that we don't promote growth in those areas? I don't think that we're really talking about accelerating or investing. It's just knowing where we have to put our resources because that's where growth is going to occur to a certain extent, almost whether we like it or not.
You also mentioned, so my other question is, you also mentioned some minimum standards for police and fire and sewer and how, and this is a really, really just totally exploratory question, how open are you to putting some minimum standards on this, on school capacity? And that's, you don't have to answer that now, but.
Thank you. It's a great question. Great ask. It's a great ask. It really is.
That-
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, that's not entirely in the city's control where fire and police are because they're staff of the city. So that's a tough, that would be very difficult, I think, to do, obviously, without a collaboration with the school district. And commenting on the mayor stating that, you know, it's not so much that it's a priority growth area, but it's just where we're not. But some of the priority growth areas are we're labeling that, and a few of them, a good portion is going to be a focus on bringing commercial in. So I don't know how that will exactly affect the school district. But what I would also like to say, when we talk about areas like around Paramount or areas around Century Farms, I think this is going to continue to be a pattern because as we have challenges with housing inventory and housing affordability, we are selling so much more new construction in relationship to how much resale that we have as a percentage. You know, there's if you sort of look at the charts of how much new construction has sold and how much resale has sold, that those patterns have completely changed in the last 10 years. And so I think you're going to continue to see developers that want to come in with these larger subdivisions that have kind of, you know, a park and services and playgrounds, and that you're going to start seeing this you know, these areas we're going to compact the amount of new students that are coming into a geographic area because they're, where it used to be people would come in and buy homes and it would be spread out over an entire city because you have resale here and new construction here and resale here. It's just not working that way anymore. And so I would anticipate this isn't going to be the last time that we're going to see this challenge where we're having a significant enrollment in a couple of years' time in one isolated geographic area, at least not until housing changes overall.
You're actually right. I think Paramount had the same issue.
They do.
When it was first built, and then Century Farm is another, and there'll be another.
Trustee Noah?
Yeah, you know, a couple of things I think are worth noting here is I like this discussion about the high growth areas. One thing that I think ends up being a challenge is going to be increasing challenge is finding the land to build a school. Finding the open piece of land that's available, particularly if you want to build a middle school, you know, where you need 28 acres, or a high school where you need, you know, 50 acres or 60 acres or something to build a high school. That's a very real kind of consideration, I think, as you're looking at these growth areas. You know, is that sort of land available for us? You know, I mean, on the other hand, you know, the thing to keep in mind, I think, in terms of actually building a physical plant to deal with capacity, I don't see anything in our political reality where that's going to be anything other than a reactive process and not a proactive process. Because basically we can just go out and use bonds. I don't think our taxpayers are going to say, oh, you know, we're going to speculate that, you know, they're going to build, you know, 2,000 homes over in this spot on the west side of Meridian, and, you know, Avamore is going to get to, you know, however big, and we're just going to proactively get a bond to build a school. What we hear from voters, at least I do, in coming up bonds, is that they respond to the crisis. And that's one of the struggles I think we have, and because of our funding mechanism for doing the construction.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strayer?
maybe we'll have an opportunity to move into more of the bond discussion.
We are soon.
In the meeting. But it would help me to understand, you know, obviously raising bonds has been the method that's always been used. I know impact fees was tried and kind of scrapped. I'd love to get a feel for how you're sizing that. You know, you hear about bond fatigue, and I think there's a real danger in not having an adequately sized bond. Anecdotally, I'd say it feels like the community is acknowledging there's a crisis point with overcrowding in the school system generally. So from my own perspective, I just need a lot of data on what does the baseline look like right now with what's been approved? How over capacity are we? What, are we gonna get all 7 of those schools from the bond that you're thinking of? Is there a way to be more proactive with that for what we know has been approved already? And with our priority growth areas, do you have an opportunity to kind of bring that into how you're sizing things? I feel for you guys because you're really put in a reactive position almost all the time. Anything we can do to help you get more proactive, I'm really into talking about this idea about minimum standards for school capacity. I would absolutely invite you to provide data about what you think an appropriate minimum standard is for a quality education. I would love to get that information. I'd be very open to hearing that.
If I could actually just ask, kind of related to that, I mean, what is, would the city ever be interested or be able to control the, or to raise their minimum, was it homes on acreage standard? So when passing, when doing plats or, allowing land to be built. In other words, instead of, I think it's what, 0.1 to 0.2 home on a 0.1 or 0.2 acreage, right? Maybe increasing that in some way? Does that make sense? Am I
Yeah,
speaking okay?
well-
So in other words, you have 1 acre, 5 homes
Yeah.
per acre, 7 homes per acre.
Well, we just adopted our comp plan with our density per acres on it, so that would,
Yeah.
that is what is set and what people will be allowed to ask for.
Okay.
Which on one hand, that gives you all the tools you need to do your planning, so long as the city stays to those thresholds in terms of a general density from that sample. When those change, it affects it affects our water and sewer, it affects the schools, up or down, because if it's planned for a huge development that goes to minimal, well, then your schools that you think you need, your sites, don't get filled either. So it is in there, and I assume Eric and others look at that information in helping determine what is needed and where in the future from that standpoint. If we can, I'm just going to wrap up this item so we can move into the other ones. We brought this up and just say, I think Tuesday night, City Council did approve a new position for our planning department that hopefully will be a resource to you all and to the City Council in terms of the information that maybe you heard City Council is looking for from the district. And conversely, will also be that person to help provide that better coordination moving forward in our planning processes generally. So hopefully we'll have that resource on by the summer, that position, that they can start working a little bit more collaboratively from that standpoint.
Mayor Susan.
Dr. Reynolds.
Thank you so much, Mayor Simison. Just a couple of things. I wanted to thank you all so much for the comprehensive plan. It's been a great tool for us, for our staff. And we put together some questions. It's very fun to see how similar our concerns are. And if you'd like, I can leave these with you. They're just for information. It's just a great way for us to learn more about what you want and need and how we fit into that kind of picture. The second thing I'd like to share is how much I appreciate the staff. So Mr. Hood, Mr. Sidaway, Sonia, the City of Meridian staff works very closely with the folks at the shop floor level, and we appreciate that constant communication and trying to figure out luscious challenges and opportunities every day. So thank you very much.
Is there any last thing before we move into the next item?
If I could just ask one quick, it's more of a favor, but actually it's in that list of questions, but it was something that staff had brought up that, frankly, we're having a state initiative. There is a state initiative to increase CTE within the state. It's obviously it's a priority for the school district as well. The city does a lot of analysis for business. And one thing that would be great is to be able to find some conduit to bring some of that analysis back to the school district to figure out how best we can align our CT programs to really the needs of the area and what partners might even be available. I think the district I'm assuming the district would be quite open to, receiving partners, of course, but, understanding where we can align the future of CTE to the real needs of the community would be a great thing to know. And you guys are more on the forefront of that with your research.
Thank you. Is there something else?
Yes, I have a couple things I wanted to say. I think for both of us, I don't know if you've ever tried to put a puzzle together and not been able to look at the cover. And every time that we hear an application, we've got one piece of that puzzle that we're trying to put into the bigger puzzle, the one piece going into the puzzle without having the ability to look at the front. And that's how it feels when we're sometimes trying to approve or deny these applications with limited information. And so I'm curious, since we're kind of closing up the portion of the meeting that we're leading, if you could give us an idea of the best way to request from you some more detailed information that could come to us prior to our applications, what would be the appropriate way for us to make those requests?
Thank you so much, Mayor Simison and council members and trustees. I always have to think in a simplistic way sometimes when we have very complex issues, but the history of those letters is, just since I've been fortunate to be in West State, has been interesting in terms of what City Council has requested us not to do, as well as things that we were requested to do. So when I first came, I was asked not to send those letters out ever again, that they were causing a lot of havoc and discontent among developers. And so we stopped sending them out. And then time passed, and no, we need you to send the letters out. So we tried to modify the letter so there was an in-between kind of thing. And so here's what I think our letters say now, and I brought copies of them for you. There's a green light, a yellow light, and a red light letter. So the green light letter is when we look at the development area and we look at the schools around and what we're projecting as growth. We just stay neutral. So we don't, in the letter you'll see there's no request. The yellow light is when we look and we see there's a development, and there's a little phrase in there that says we would request that it be delayed. So for example, there's some areas that are going in that once a Waihe High School opens, it will help take care of that. And then we have a red light letter that actually says based on what we know, we would deny, I don't know if we use the word deny.
I've seen it.
Sent one
Yeah.
recently.
So I think to answer your other question, what would really help us, and I don't know if we would do it in a collaborative way with just a couple of people, if you could pencil in some pieces that would help you, so if you could kind of help us edit the letters so that we're helping you as much as you were helping us, I think that would be great. But it has been interesting, the history of the letter we've sent out.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing that.
didn't know
That
that.
helps me a lot, that's
First I've heard of
the perspective. So would you recommend that we, as council, talk about that and collectively come to an idea of what
Yes.
we would like to?
Talk about
I have some ideas, but we could do that later.
I'm looking at Mr. Yocum. Okay, good.
that. Attaboy. We'll talk about that, for sure. Mr. Mayor, just for the record, these questions have been added to the record as well, so.
Perfect. With that, we'll move into item 5A, which is an update on Hawaii High School, Pleasant Valley Elementary School, Idaho Fine Arts Academy. Turn this over to whom?
I'll start at least.
Trustee
I'm
Cox.
sure that Joe may want to jump in. I'll pass these around. These are part of a presentation that we did, the district did with the board. Kind of shows you where we are with Pleasant View. Let that circulate first.
Did you need copies of the letter that we sent out?
It's making it through. Oh, my
Well, we have
Oh, yeah. So Pleasant View right now, we're looking at a June 2020 completion date, and the facility is pretty close. I think, Joe, what was this? When was that photo taken? About 6 weeks ago. Okay, so this is construction about 6 weeks ago. So it's getting, it probably has roofs on some of the buildings now, and it's definitely getting close. So I don't think that we're looking at any delays for Pleasant View Elementary, and it looks like it's going to be a great asset. So it's definitely on track. For Hawaii, there is a video. If you go onto the website, the school district website, you'll be able to see a video of what this actually looks like. We've got, gosh, it's coming together quite well. And again, we're looking at an August 2021 completion. Probably the most controversial thing was the Owyhee Storm logo. So
Crazy.
yeah, so, but I think it's looking very good. So we don't see any concern there. And again, we're looking at probably just under 2,000 capacity for that. So it'll be a very strong asset. And I think that area right there, that corridor, that north-west corridor is our highest growth, fastest growth area right now. So having this up there is going to really relieve a lot of burden.
And will you, as I heard you ask it, and Joel asked it, so maybe everybody else wants to, will you let them know where Pleasant View Elementary is located at?
I think it's in Bainbridge.
Pleasant View is in between Bell Tower and Bainbridge, so it's off of Chinden and Black Cat.
I heard a couple times, figured it was good.
It's right there, see?
I know.
I got the picture, see?
And for any council that hasn't been in the area, you can see all the homes that are
Oh, yeah.
in that area as well.
Yeah, they're just waiting to fill that. Are there any questions you might have about these two schools? Please.
Councilman Pro?
I've been hearing that Owyhee is going to be full as soon as it opens. Can you share with us if that's true and where the existing students, which schools they'll be coming from, and how much of that will be new students to the area and how much will be just moved from Eagle or
I think the majority right now, that's a busing school, basically. There is no, I mean, there is walk zone, I guess, on a paper term, but generally it's all going to be bussed in. And so we have Star, North Meridian, and Eagle. That's where they're going to converge from. And Jill, you may know a little bit more about that than I do as far as where some of them are coming from.
Yeah, obviously, this is all subject to the attendance area process we
Right, exactly.
talked about earlier, but we've got significant massive overcrowding at Rocky, really significant overcrowding at Eagle, and so a good chunk of the kids, my guess is that the solution from the attendance area committee is they're going to be looking at those overcrowding situations and taking them from sort of taking a good chunk of students from the northwest corner that are feeding those two schools. I don't know what the growth, last I saw, and Eric can correct me, I don't think it's actually going to be full exactly when we open it. There's I believe there'll be capacity, but this also depends on this attendance area process. I mean, they could go and, recommend something that would have it be full too, and I suspect that that isn't the direction that they're gonna take. There may, I think there's a possibility there could be some coming from Meridian High's attendance area too, depending on how they draw the boundaries, but.
One thing there, when you do that, when you open a school, especially a high school, you have to, a lot of times, there's a ton of people that say they want to have their siblings continue at the same school their siblings attended. You have people that, grandfather privilege type things like that. So it takes a couple, 3 years to work those boundary changes to where they're full into the system. And that's just based on people are humans. I mean, I can remember that, that everybody had their, everybody had their bedrooms painted blue and gold for Meridian High, and then Centennial opens, and oh my God, we got to go to maroon and silver, and every single time we've opened a high school, those issues happen, and it does take, it takes it's kind of like, getting a jet off the runway. You've got to have a takeoff period, and that's what will happen.
Councilman
I had a question. I wasn't on council when this was approved, so I want to talk about one of the other partners. But I want to correct you, it wasn't my bedroom, it was my bathroom that was clean.
Okay, I stand corrected, I didn't go in.
That was the only high school you could go back to. But anyway, ACHD, another partner that we have to work with and we impact certainly. I was just curious, living on Ustick Road, what the plan is. Is that going to be widened? Is there going to be turn lanes, I'm assuming? I was just kind of curious. Can anybody speak to that? Because lots of construction traffic on that road right now, and there's no turn lanes, and it gets interesting at times.
Mr. Yocum? It's the hot seat.
Yes, thank you. So, the school district will be widening Ustick Road, leading into the entrance of the new collector that we'll be building. That'll be called North Whitey Storm Avenue. That'll run all the way from Ustick up to McMillan. The developer to the north is conditioned by ACHD to expand McMillan to allow for a turn lane up there. We also have to expand the intersection of McDermott and Ustick to 3 lanes in all 4 directions. That'll remain a 4-way stop, however, but there will be a signal at Ustick and in the new collector road. So it doesn't go all the way back to McDermott, but it goes a distance back for a turn lane.
Okay. I assumed things were going to be happening, but I just wasn't sure, so appreciate that.
We're waiting on some final written comments from ACHD. We resubmitted our traffic impact study when the development to the north was approved, and so now we're looking for that final bit of analysis so we can get our development applications and move forward.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
This
Or-
one.
Meridian.
Apologies, okay. I had a question, and I don't want to go through the past or anything like that, but I was curious, now we've heard this great update, we're going to have a dedicated planner for the West Utah School District. And my hope would be, and my question would be, would you guys be open to including that individual in collaboration with you before you purchase land for future schools, to make sure that that line of communication is wide open and that we're giving each other input back and forth, both on our priority growth areas, but then also getting that feedback back so we can make sure, we're, as much as we can, right, trying to pick the ideal locations for future schools together.
One of the problems is Meridian is only about 36% of the district. That's a big problem.
Liz, would you ask me for this land that would be purchased in the Meridian area?
Right,
Okay.
yeah, specific to Meridian, and maybe there are different ways to do that, like we could have, different liaisons that each of us could choose, or, but just making, feels like things have been clunky in the past, and if we had a communication plan in place together, maybe that would be a great way to help avoid future issues. If we had our planner that was dedicated to you and the transportation issues as a dedicated point of contact, perhaps you'd be willing to have a point of contact back to us. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have, definitely have conduits between the two organizations. Going back to Trustee Smiley's point, though, our view is like that little box, those little set of boxes over there on your map. Ours is a lot bigger, and so we've got 6 municipalities we're basically working with, and a lot of the decisions that Joe Yoakum and others are making when they purchase land, it's probably because of that bigger footprint. And so definitely having communication is so important, and I think we're all behind that, but just realize that some of the decisions are made with this. It's a 6 municipality school district, and so it might not, if we were just Meridian, then it would make sense. But looking at it would look different looking at the, just realize we have a wider view, and we kind of have to maintain that, if that makes sense.
Maybe I can just add in, though, I think maybe the benefit that you guys don't have is the city is constantly in discussions with people who are coming in for development applications, or we know prospectively what may be occurring that you do not know before you make land purchases. Understanding that you've got to look larger, but at least from the city's perspective, we may be able to help you find better opportunities in the future for sites before you purchase.
For a good price?
Very well could be for a good price. I think that we're privy to a lot of information that you're not.
Sure.
Through our processes. If we had that conversation before you go to purchase, or as you're looking at sites, it may benefit you more than you realize in terms of finding the best location in the general area. So I'll just leave it at that.
I think it'd be great to have the information in the decision-making process. I mean, I can't imagine why we wouldn't want to have the information. And like I said, understanding there's a lot of factors in that decision, but that just more informed decision-making is always a good thing.
Yep.
And I know that, for all of our entities, it's typically done in executive session for those conversations, so it's just whatever your comfort level is, either through that process, I'll leave it to Dr. Reynolds to determine through as we either bring somebody on or conversation or don't.
Yeah, because a very real consideration is you got to get into the mind of the contractors. They're going to build where it's cheaper, and it's cheaper to build out in the rural county than it is within the city. Then after you've built, then you come apply to get into the city, and they're gone. But that's my old boss in Boise used to say it's called drive till you qualify, and that's just a practical issue.
Well, we are 5 minutes away. I heard that there's some people out, got to leave at 6:30, so could we move into item 5B at this point in time? I know we didn't hear about the Fine Arts Academy, but maybe we could roll that into this conversation since it was part of the discussion a little bit on Tuesday.
Well, the Fine Arts Academy, we approved with conditions. We have to do some additional review, but we did approve that the other night. And so that will be a facility, I believe it's, the budget is 12 million, or just under 12 million at this point. It will not have a theater auditorium like we were hoping to roll out, but we're going to be starting a phase 1, and hopefully in a few years maybe be able to look at an auditorium.
And you want to share with them? I don't think everyone knows where it is or anything about it.
I beg your pardon, sorry. The IFA project is over at it's right next to the DSC, or the school district building, the main school district building, over on
Central.
East Central.
Thank you very much. We have, it's actually near your soccer fields, which we help with. So that area right there also, maybe a big dream someday, might even turn into a bigger project, to do a bigger auditorium of some sort. That would be wonderful.
He's heard that dream.
Because it's got plenty of parking. But I think it's definitely a dream of ours to get those kids settled. Then also, as far as the bond proposal goes, we have not voted to approve it yet, but we'll be looking at that during the next meeting. Do you know what's on, does everyone know what's on the bond coming up?
I don't think they,
Okay, if I could just go very quickly over what's on the bond. It won't take more than a minute. So the bond is what, about a $62 million bond, which it makes it one of our lower bonds we've had over the past, 10, 15 years. Generally, they're a bit higher. And obviously, we have money for Blue Valley Elementary. That would be a capacity of 750 seats we're adding, and that's down south of that Hillsdale area. Okay. We're also
Say that again, it's where?
south of that Hillsdale area,
It's
so
off
it'll
of
help. with it.
Kodiak, it's over by Victory Middle
Victory
School.
Middle,
We own some
Blue
land.
Valley?
Yes.
Yeah, blue, well,
Blue, okay.
Blue Valley, yes.
Blue.
Joe, you got it right, is that right? Okay.
I'm very familiar with that one.
And another project we have is in Eagle. It's Eagle Elementary replacement. Right now, we have an elementary school, which is, it's a very badly built school, and that area needs badly to replace it. So that's about a $19 million project. That will support about 150 kids. We have a new CTE center, capacity about 700. That's about $7 million. Centennial High School Classroom Addition.
Can you slow down
That
just a
area.
little bit? I'm sorry.
I beg your
Can
pardon,
you
I'm sorry, I
slow
was just
down
trying to
a
hit
little
your
bit?
time. So we have, okay,
Oh, okay.
so I can make a copy if you'd
Okay.
like, I'd be happy to send that out to everyone. But the CTE, we have a new CTE center for $7 million. Centennial High School, looking at a classroom addition for $1.7 million. That would help increase capacity at that school for about 180 kids. Desert Sage Classroom Addition, that would increase capacity by about 200 seats, and that's about $2.3 million.
Where's that at?
It's off
It's south.
Desert Sage is
South.
Lake Hazel's.
Exactly, south.
Yeah, it's in-
And also Lake Hazel, we're looking at a remodel there for about 10 million. Lake Hazel is one of those weird places that doesn't have, what do they call it, internal heating, or?
It's the heating system, we don't have, we have the air,
They basically pump it into the attic.
we have forced air. We have forced air.
It's a very weird thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the last ones we have. And we also have playground safety equipment improvements, which are needed for safety for the elementary schools. And that's about 3.7. So that all adds up to about 62.
And we're looking at, we're surveying the committee to see if they would support the auditorium for IFA.
Exactly. So if we can, we'll try to fit IFA into that as well, but right now, we're just looking at phase 1 for IFA.
Might also just briefly mention, we approved the supplemental levy authorization for a supplemental levy election in May as well. That's just shy of 6% of our overall budget.
is that just a continuation of the current?
Yeah, it's the
Yes.
current same level as the,
And I
same
believe the
dollar
way-
number level as the previous.
And the way we're actually pricing these out, we're retiring debt, but we basically reduced debt along with, if we increase the debt, we're also reducing debt. So really, it's not changing the taxes people would be paying at this point. It'd be pretty much even. And so hopefully it's an easy sell for us.
Council, are there any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
I have a, not so much a question, but perhaps a recommendation. I've had the privileges of being involved with the political arm of the Boise Regional Realtors, and we oftentimes have the districts that come before us and talk to us about collaborating with them from an endorsement standpoint and maybe even financially as you go through the campaigns to get the bonds passed by voters. And we saw Boise School District go through the process and do an exceptionally fantastic job as they put together a campaign to get public support. And so I'm curious if, well, I guess I do have a question. I'm curious if you've gotten that far yet in discussing how you'll go about gaining public support, or if you're waiting to decide that until after you collectively approve moving forward with the bond.
And we're open for anything, but yeah, we haven't. We haven't.
We have some legal constraints on what we can do. in
Exactly
terms of,
that too, yeah.
Really serious limitations on what we can do for advocacy.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor.
So,
Yeah, that needs to be done through an outside group.
Okay. That much I knew.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to understand, just how will the bond get us where we need to be? So I'm hearing there's 14,400 kids in the pipeline. I just wrote this number down. That could be incorrect, it could be correct. I don't know what your capacity is. And I'm just like back of the envelope thinking, okay, maybe this adds another 1,000 of capacity. I mean, where are we now and where does this take us to if this bond goes through?
I can try to address it. So over the last 4 years, let's say 650 students a year is a good average. I think the numbers I saw in terms of capacity from this bond is on the order of like 1,700 kids. So it's about 3 years worth of enrollment growth for us. And then, there'll be another bond. And then part of that, it's, our process is reactive, but it also, it'd be great to be able to say, do what Clark County did that Eric was talking about and have this monster bond where you can sit there and build out and be more responsive to where the growth actually happens over this protracted period of time. We don't really have.
So like a 10-year.
Yeah, that would be a nice thing, but we don't have that option. But, one of the things when you run a reactive bond is that you are responding to where the growth has happened. So this is taking care of about another 3 years, roughly. I mean, hard to have the crystal ball, but, and hopefully we'll have something else come down the pike when it's really clear where the need is.
Yeah, the challenge, unfortunately, is if it doesn't pass. I mean, that's a little bit of a concern for us. And if it doesn't pass, then I'm afraid the situation in south of Meridian is going to be challenging. And so you'll get lots of phone calls then, I'm sure.
Mr. Mayor, follow-up. We are receiving a lot of feedback now about South Meridian, and I just speaking for myself, but I think what would be great is to really get a feel for how bad is that worst case scenario, what is realistic for bond, how much of the overcrowding are you alleviating with the bond now, and then if you did have projections of what's been approved, right, like what's in the pipeline, I mean, can you address that with the bond? And I don't know how that works legally, but I'm just curious if you're considering that, because the issue is a bond fatigue issue. Just speaking my own opinion, people get fatigued, so it feels like if I'm putting myself in your shoes, make a appropriate material request for what we know is coming, what we know is happening now, is what I would encourage you to do, as opposed to just setting ourselves up for continuous systemic overcrowding.
Which is with the history as we stated.
I apologize since I'm just new to this. Do I address you through the entire meeting or do I address Dr. Reynolds through their portion?
They put me in charge for the entire meeting. I do want to try to be respectful of people's time. I know people have to leave, so unless there can be comments afterwards or questions for anybody that has them. So unless there's something really pressing, I would ask that we bring the meeting to a close and let people follow up individually if necessary. Does that work? Okay, with that, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burr.
I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
I have a motion second to adjourn the meeting. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay? Ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.